Welcome back to DRM News. You know, things have been pretty tense lately over in Turkey.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on.
I mean, this whole situation with Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem Imamoglu, getting arrested and jailed, it sparked some pretty huge protests. And honestly, it's grabbing attention worldwide.
For sure. It's definitely not something you can just brush aside. This is a big deal.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack all of this, like what exactly led up to this situation, what's happening right now in Turkey, and what this whole thing could mean for the future of the country. And of course, we're sticking to the information we have from our sources.
Absolutely. Got to stay grounded in the facts.
Okay, so to kick things off, can we start with Ekrem Imamoglu? He's not just any mayor, right?
No, not at all. You got to understand, Istanbul isn't just some city. It's like the heart of Turkey, the most populated city. And Imamoglu being the mayor, that automatically makes him a powerful figure.
And on top of that, he's been a pretty outspoken critic of President Erdogan.
Exactly. And that's key. He's with the Republican People's Party, the CHP, which is like the main opposition party in Turkey.
Right, the party founded by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the guy who basically created modern Turkey.
Exactly. So with that background, Imamoglu is a serious contender, arguably the biggest rival Erdogan's got right now.
And it's interesting, isn't it? The timing of this arrest, like right before everyone thought he'd be announced as the opposition's presidential candidate.
Yeah, the timing is definitely raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
And you can't forget his track record either. This guy has been elected mayor of Istanbul 3 times since 2019.
3 times? That's crazy.
Yeah, and his first win back in 2019. That ended 25 years of control by the AKP, Erdogan's party, in Istanbul. You can see why this guy's a major force.
Okay, so we've got this politically charged atmosphere, but let's talk about the actual charges against him. We've got everything from corruption.
Yeah, like leading a criminal organization, bribery, all sorts of financial misdeeds.
And even accusations of terrorism, supposedly collaborating with a pro-Kurdish group during the local elections.
It's a pretty hefty list.
Well, we have to say Imamoglu has denied all these charges, right?
Absolutely. He's been very vocal about that, denying every single accusation.
So what happened when the news of his arrest broke? What was the immediate reaction like?
Oh, people were furious. Outrage, protests started almost immediately right outside Istanbul City Hall.
And it didn't stop there, did it?
No way. It was like a wildfire. These protests spread like crazy, first to university campuses, then to other cities and towns all across Turkey.
So this wasn't just about Imamoglu then?
Seems like there's a deeper frustration here. People have been feeling the pressure for a long time, and this was like the final straw.
Right, like all those underlying issues with the economy, education, healthcare, it all seems to have bubbled over.
Yeah, exactly. Think about the scale of these demonstrations. Tens of thousands of people in Istanbul alone defying bans just to show their discontent.
And it wasn't just Istanbul either. We had reports coming in from Ankara, Izmir, Bursa, Antalya, all major cities.
Massive turnout. Reports estimated almost 300,000 people in Istanbul that Friday night. A sea of people protesting.
So how did the government react to all of this? I mean, with that many people on the streets?
They cracked down pretty hard. Reports of detentions, hundreds of them, in a single night.
Wow.
And we're talking pepper spray, water cannons, tear gas, the whole shebang. They weren't messing around.
It sounds pretty intense.
Oh, yeah, it was. And it wasn't just boots on the ground either. The government banned public gatherings in major cities, started restricting social media, and even shut down some transit hubs for a while.
They went all out, huh?
Yeah, they definitely wanted to get a handle on the situation, increase police presence everywhere, blocking traffic, you name it.
So they were pretty clear about their stance on these protests.
Oh, absolutely. The Interior Minister straight up said there'd be no tolerance for anyone messing with societal order.
And Erdogan himself didn't hold back either, calling the protests street terrorism.
Yeah, that was a pretty strong statement. It shows you where they stood. No room for dissent, basically.
Okay, so let's circle back to those charges against Imamoglu. We touched on them earlier, but what's the latest there?
Well, he's been formally arrested and jailed, waiting for his trial on those corruption charges.
And it's not just him, right? There are over 100 other people caught up in this too.
Yep, including officials from the Istanbul municipality. Seems like a pretty big investigation into the city's administration.
And of course, there's that whole issue of the timing of these charges, right, when he's emerging as a potential presidential candidate.
Yeah, the opposition's crying foul, saying it's a blatant attempt to sideline him.
And naturally, the justice minister is denying any political motivation.
Classic back and forth, isn't it?
It is. But then there's this other development with his university diploma.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. So they're claiming there were irregularities with his diploma going back 30 years.
30 years? Are you serious?
Sounds crazy, right? But that's the claim. And because of this, they're saying he's not eligible to run for president. You need a university degree for that, according to the Turkish constitution.
And how's Imamoglu responding to this?
Well, he's not taking it lying down. He's planning to fight it in court naturally.
So that's another legal battle on his plate.
Yeah, and on top of all that, there are rumors of even more court cases coming his way, stuff that could potentially bar him from politics, even if it's just temporary.
Man, he's really facing an uphill battle. So with all this happening, what's been the reaction from the international community?
It's been kind of muted, to be honest. Like, the UN just issued a standard statement about hoping for due process, and the US, they're basically staying out of it, calling it an internal matter.
Which is kind of surprising, considering Turkey's a pretty important player on the world stage.
You'd think there would be more of a reaction, right? But then again, international politics is a complicated game.
Definitely. But we did see a big economic impact, right? The Turkish central bank had to spend something like $11.5 billion to prop up the lira after Imamoglu's arrest.
Yeah, investors got spooked. That's a sure sign of worry about instability. Shows you how much confidence the markets have in Turkey right now.
Not great, to say the least. And we have seen some criticism coming out of Europe, like the outgoing German chancellor called this whole thing a very bad sign for democracy in Turkey.
And the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she also voiced concerns, saying Turkey needs to protect democratic values, especially for elected officials.
But so far, it's mostly just words, right? No real action.
Yeah, and a lot of analysts are saying we shouldn't expect much more than that. Turkey's just too strategically important.
It's like their global position outweighs concerns about their internal politics.
It often does, unfortunately. But remember the U.S.-Turkey relationship. That's a factor, too. President Trump had that phone call with Erdogan recently, and his envoy called it transformational, saying good things are coming from Turkey.
So it sounds like the U.S. might be shifting its priorities in the region.
Could be. Some analysts are even saying this could actually embolden Erdogan, knowing he might have the U.S. on his side.
And what about Europe? Do they have any leverage here?
Well, there's been talk about Europe needing Turkey's help with peacekeeping in Ukraine.
So they might be hesitant to push too hard.
Yeah, they've got their own interests to consider. It's a balancing act, that's for sure. Trying to uphold democratic ideals while also dealing with these real-world political necessities.
Okay, so let's shift gears to the internal politics in Turkey. Where does this leave the upcoming presidential election?
Well, even though he's detained, the CHP is sticking with Imamoglu as their candidate. They even went ahead with a symbolic primary vote to show their commitment.
Wow, that's a bold move.
And a lot of his supporters are adamant that he should stay the candidate, even if he has to run his campaign from prison.
It's a pretty remarkable display of support. But when are these elections even happening?
That's the big question. Erdogan's term is supposed to end in 2028, but there are rumors about calling early elections.
Early elections? But why would they do that?
Well, here's the thing. If they have early elections, it could let Erdogan run for another term, even though he'd hit his term limit in 2028 under normal circumstances.
So it's a way to get around the rules.
Essentially, yeah. It's a tricky legal situation. We'll have to see how it plays out.
And it's interesting, isn't it? This whole thing with Imamoglu being jailed, it kind of reminds me of what happened to Erdogan himself back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, you mean when he was jailed as mayor of Istanbul?
Exactly. A lot of people say that actually boosted his popularity and helped him rise to power.
It's a classic underdog story, right?
Yeah.
But whether that same dynamic will play out with Imamoglu is hard to say.
Right, because Erdogan controls things way more now than back then, right?
Oh, absolutely. The media landscape is different, and he's got a much stronger grip on state institutions. It's not the same playing field anymore.
So we've got all this political drama unfolding. But what about the city of Istanbul itself? How's all this affecting the actual running of the city?
Well, it's not good. With the mayor in jail and all these investigations going on, things are going to be pretty disrupted.
It's got to be impacting those millions of residents who rely on the city's services.
Yeah, it's a real mess. So to sum all this up, we've got a major political figure, Ekrem Imamoglu, facing some serious accusations, which he denies, leading to his arrest and protests erupting all over the country.
And the government is responding with a pretty heavy hand.
Yep, cracking down on protests and basically saying they won't tolerate dissent.
And the international community is, well, they're kind of sitting on the fence.
Yeah, a bit of cautious criticism here and there, but no real concrete action. Turkey's too important strategically for them to rock the boat too much.
And at the heart of it all is this question. Is Turkey's democracy really at risk? I mean, here we have a popular opposition leader being targeted right when he's about to challenge the president.
It's a tough situation, and it really highlights the tension between domestic politics and international relations. Like, how do you balance supporting democratic values with all those complicated strategic alliances and economic interests?
And what does this situation tell us about the state of democracy, not just in Turkey, but in other countries that are strategically important on the world stage?
It's a question worth pondering. And the implications of this whole situation, they're going to be felt for a long time, both in Turkey and beyond. It's a story we need to keep our eyes on.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that what happens internally in a country can have ripple effects all over the globe. Thanks for breaking this down with me.
Of course. Always happy to dig into these complex issues.
And to all our listeners out there, stay informed and stay engaged. This is DRM News signing off.